Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to this episode of our program. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we have with us Henry Kaminski, who is with Unique Designz. Welcome to the program, Henry.
How you doing, Mike? Pleasure to be here.
Hey, doing really good. Let's jump right into telling us about your business, Unique Designz.
Awesome. So Unique Designz was formed about 10 years ago, sort of by accident, quite frankly. Right when I got out of college, I got a very baseline job at one of the local hospitals, and I was there for actually 8 years, starting my career there as very. It was a appointment registrar. So basically what would happen is when somebody would come in for a specific appointment, I would make sure that that registration got scheduled, or that person got registered into the conference or the appointment correctly. So it was a very mundane job, and right out of college, it was something that I needed to do. I wanted to work and get out there in the force and start building my career up. So now I did that for about 2 years. I hated it. It was terrible. Half of my day was literally cleaning coffee pots, and it was terrible. And I said, you know what? After, getting a college degree, is this what it was all about? Is this what this comes to? And I couldn't handle that. So every promotion or every job posting that would come up that I had any interest in that hospital, I would go for. And over and over and over, I would constantly get denied because of lack of experience, or, you just weren't a good fit. And it drove me crazy. So finally, about 5 years in, I finally landed a position at the Children's Hospital as a special event director. So what I was responsible for is creating special events that raised money for Sudden Infant Death Syndrome Center. And basically what that was, it was a very rewarding job. If you don't know what SIDS is, it's when a baby under the age of 1 year old dies suddenly and unexpectedly. And they don't know why. And so it was an extremely challenging position, because it was a tough cause to raise money for, because there wasn't any answers. And people had a hard time, donating and getting involved in that, because they were like, well, if there's no answer, there's no, I don't see the cost. So anyway, long story short, I did that for about 2 years, and I finally landed an awesome sponsorship from Z100, one of the biggest radio stations in New York City at the time. And I asked them if they would sponsor one of my events, and they welcomed with open arms, and they said, yes, absolutely. We'll back you up 100%. We'll have, Danielle Monero from the Z Morning Zoo come out and be there at the event. So super, super cool stuff. So what happened was, I was like, whoa, here's my shot. I really need to build this event up as big as I possibly can. So I needed tons of marketing materials, posters, brochures, flyers, email marketing material to promote the event. So at the time, I had a buddy. His name was Jerry Camerata, and he was actually a graphic designer at the time. And he offered his services as a donation and actually did all the graphic design work for the event. And so when I sat down with him and we mapped out the whole campaign, I was enamored and mesmerized by what graphic design actually was. And so I knew at that point that I found a calling. I found something that I was fascinated by. So we did the event. The event was a huge success. We raised over $25,000 for the event. And now, after watching Jerry create all of this awesome design work, I was like, I want to do that. Like, that is what I want to do. So what I did was I convinced my boss at the time to invest in the Photoshop program to actually allow me to do all the in-house design for all the events that would come after that big event that we just launched. And so she said, no problem. So what I started to do was I started to create all the designs for all the future events. And eventually I started, other departments in the hospital would see the event invitations and be like, wow, who created that for you? And I was like, well, I did. And so long story short, I started to do all the design work for other departments and stuff. And what happened was I started to build up a little bit of a clientele outside of the work and outside of the hospital work. And slowly but surely it started to grow and grow and grow. And I never had any formal education on design. I literally learned it from teaching myself. And about 2008, everything started to get really rocky at the hospital. The financial crisis hit. They were laying people off, and there was a big shakeup at the hospital. And what happened was half of my salary at the time was funded by a grant. And I was brought into the office, and my boss said, listen, at January 1st, this grant is going to go away. And unfortunately, you're going to have to be demoted to a administrative secretary of some sort. And at the time, I was half of my day was, and they kind of slowly brought me into this, and half of my day was consumed of filing paperwork and stuff like that. And I really started to feel imprisoned in that job, because at this point I've built up this creative ability, and I was doing all this design work, and half of my day was spent filing papers. And so I said, I can't do this anymore. So finally they said, well, you have an option. We'll keep you on board, and you'll have your benefits and so on and so forth, or you can leave. And so I said, you know what? I have to do what my heart tells me to do, and it's to leave. So what happened was I left, and between 2008 and 2009, all by myself as the founder of Unique Designz, generated $248,000 in revenue that year, my first year in business. And that's what created Unique Designz.
Two words jump out at me through your introduction there, which is children and calling. And I would then want to ask you, because of that feeling of calling and passion, who do you have the most passion for helping?
People that want to make this world a better place. At the end of the day, we only have, I heard this one day on an interview, and it really stuck with me. We only have one at-bat in this game of life. So when I see people going above and beyond to try to truly make this life of theirs the best that they can, and at the same time help someone else, that's what drives me. That's what drives me. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. It takes it past, I help doctors, lawyers, chiropractors, dentists, construction workers, or fill in the blank, with, taking it 10,000 steps past that to go such at a higher elevated level to you want to help people make a difference in the world.
That's it. That's the big picture. That's the big picture. And, I have a soft spot in my heart for the entrepreneur who created a business from scratch, like I did. And to help them and share my experiences with them growing a business now for the past 9 years, or 10 years, I should say, I want to help that person get to a level to where I'm at right now, or something similar. because, as any entrepreneur will tell you, there's no straight road to success, and there's constant peaks and valleys. And if I can share my experiences with them to help them get to where they need to be quicker without making the same mistakes I did, that's kind of where it all comes out. So it's a little bit more than just design here at Unique Designz. We have a passion for entrepreneurship and really taking my creative ability and making it more business focused, which I think is very rare.
Yes, and one of the things that you mentioned, which is having no formal training, some people could look at that in a negative way, and I would position it as a very positive way, because you look at things through the lens, through the mindset of what should work, what does work, what's proven to work, and what people want. And that's the same thing as what you just said, which is teaching people and helping them learn from your mistakes. Is that an accurate depiction?
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. Because, listen, nobody's perfect. And the only way we learn, is to make mistakes and to, John Maxwell has that book, Failing Forward. There's nothing more that resonates with me more than, how can we learn? How can we grow? How can we expand if we're not making mistakes, if we're not failing?
And I've heard it said, failing fast, meaning get out there and make some things happen and make some mistakes so that you know where your boundaries are, what works and what does not work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk about your 4 principles for success, which are what's your why, having a vision, things aren't always as they seem, and building relationships. So we'll cover those, but how did you come to discover this kind of a solution?
Well, it was the things that I struggled with the most in my entrepreneurial career in the beginning. I didn't have a clear vision. I didn't know really what my why was. And maybe at the time, my why was the wrong why. And, things aren't always what they seem. There was a lot of, as my career grew, as I became more mature, as I became more experienced, I seen a lot of things go down in my personal life, in business life. And at the end of the day, I took a step back one day and I said, wow, money isn't the cure. Money doesn't make you happy. And that's where things aren't always what they seem. Because I've seen people with a lot of money, and I thought they were really happy, and they were miserable. And so that was a life lesson for me, and there were so many things that happened under that, we'll call it chapter, or under that principle that, maybe we'll get into later, but that I think there's tons of life lessons out of that. And then as far as building relationships go, you can't get through life or get to the top by yourself. And building relationships and the right relationships and the strong relationships will help you get to where you want to be.
Yeah, and those principles that we will go deeper on are not ones that you could just typically get or learn or pick up and check the box off. So do you feel that it was a culmination of events in your life that brought you to kind of bringing that whole picture in focus? Or can you think of any trigger events that might have made you kind of really sit up and take notice and say, this is a life lesson here I need to hone?
There was multiple events that happened. There were some key points in this journey that really stick out over others. And so there's a combination. There was a series of things that happened. And I call them like benchmarks. Mm-hmm. And and I guess we'll get into each one of those later.
So more of a culmination, not an epiphany or a one event where now I have it, because that's most of what life is that journey and that learning experience, and you just have to keep your antenna up, your eyes open, and that awareness of what is happening in my life so that I can improve and fine-tune.
That's right. Maybe the catalyst of all of this, brought me back to the fourth grade. So, yes and no to answer your question. It's been a culmination over the years, but I think there was this one point in my life, and that was when I was in fourth grade, that kind of triggered everything else that happened after that. And it was a very emotional day, and it was funny. I always had a hard time reading. And when you're in fourth grade, you know how you go around the class and you have to read a paragraph or two, and
sure.
Then the next person behind you, they have to do the next two, and so on and so forth. So during that time in my life, my parents were going through a horrendous divorce. And I saw things that I truly, as a 8 or 9-year-old kid, wish I never saw. And I got called on that day to read. And it was, I just looked at my teacher. I just looked up after she called me because my head was down, and I knew my turn was coming, and I was nervous. And I looked up, and I was just like, I can't do this. And I started to cry like no other. And she didn't know what the hell was going on. So she asked me, she goes, what's the matter? And so I remember her taking me out of the class, and I kind of told her what was going on, with the divorce and stuff. And she was like, okay. So she comes back into class. She goes, class, close your books. We're not going to do any more reading. We're going to help Henry today. And she prefaced the whole conversation. And because there was 8, 9-year-old kids in that class, like, they didn't know what the heck was going on. But she went into this whole thing about relationships, divorce, the whole nine, right? And it was crazy. All of a sudden, all these other kids started raising their hands. And they were like, I'm going through the same thing you are, Henry. Maybe I can help you. And so we all started sharing these crazy stories amongst each other. And can you imagine this teacher watching a whole bunch of 8-year-olds sharing these types of stories with each other and helping each other? It was a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. At the end, right before the end of that class, something happened that was so strange. I found myself in the back of the class, like in the coat closet area. And one by one, kids would come up to me and ask me advice. Believe it or not. And they were asking me advice about what they should do when they get home and how they should be. And at that point, I said, God put me here for a reason, to help other people. And I remember what that felt like. How many years ago was that, Mike?
Many.
I remember what that felt like when I was rewarded by watching those kids, each one of them, walk away from me, feeling like they were better than what they were prior to talking to me. And it was such a weird day, I was the one raising my hand, screaming for help.
Yep.
And by the end of the class, I was the one helping everybody else. It's really weird.
It's unbelievable, and there's two things that jump out at me hearing that powerful story, which is, one, the perceptive and wise teacher who stopped things and didn't just gloss over it and then went deeper. And two, your vulnerability and transparency, which you weren't planning that or didn't even know what those words meant at that time. But because of that, that showed a genuine openness, and that's what had that door open for the other classmates to come and ask advice from you because they knew you were genuine. And I think that is then that catalyst moment. And then I would submit to you that from from that moment on, that culmination of life events kept coming in. It's kind of like that, I don't know, the boulder rolling down the hill, gathering moss. It's just like you picked up a little here through life and picked up a little there, but that core was there. And now you're kind of coming full circle to say, you know what? It's time to start teaching these things. And let's talk about your first principle called What's Your Why? What is that, and what does it mean?
So, yeah, that's a great question. And at first, so going back, well, let's step back a second and tell you how sort of I came to be as a human being. So it's actually funny. When my mother was, when I was young, my mother would always tell this story to like her girlfriends and to at parties, and she would say, I consider my son a miracle baby. It took me 16 years to have him. And when I heard that line over and over and over again at such a young age, I literally felt or thought for years that it took 16 years to conceive a child, not 9 months. And I never understood what in the heck she was talking about. However, as I got older, I realized that my parents actually tried to have a child for 16 years before I was born. And there was complications on my father's side and my mother's side, and their perseverance and their ability to just not give up on that journey was just told a very strong story about how strong my mother and father really were.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that, it was amazing. And so what happened was, when I was about 2 years, so they had me, everything was great, everybody was ecstatic. I finally was here, right? And when I turned, right, I think I was maybe about 18 months. I was a little less than 2 years old. My mom comes into my room, looks in the I can't think of the word, the crib, and sees me not breathing, unresponsive, and blue. I was turning blue. And she freaked out. And so she grabs my father, they call 911, ambulance comes, they rush me to the hospital, and come to find out, for whatever reason, I lost all the salt in my body, and my body started to shut down. And eventually they brought me back to life, and brought me to be, and eventually I was okay after that. And when I heard that story, I tell you, to this day, my father won't even speak of it. But my mother was very vocal with it, as I was growing up. And it made me realize that I'm here on this earth for a reason.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to spend every day of my life like tomorrow is not guaranteed. And I spent a lot of my life that way. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I'm where I'm at this point in my life, because that was my why. So what was my why? It was knowing that I was here for a purpose. And as I got older, I realized that I got a lot of reward out of helping other people. And it's probably no surprise at this point why I was in the positions that I was in at the hospital, which eventually morphed into a business, which eventually morphed into doing what I'm doing now, and it's really helping business owners and entrepreneurs, grow their businesses and increase and help their profits and revenues in their businesses, and I get a strong reward out of that. So it's kind of no surprise where I ended up. But my why was, you're here for a reason, and that's to help other people, and you better do that.
Yeah, I love it. And you went from the fourth grade guy, classmate that was helping support and give some advice to classmates to fast forwarding to this point then in your career of helping entrepreneurs, business owners with anything in their business, from past just numbers in business and transactions, but helping them to discover in their life, what's their story. So can you speak to how you would begin to approach, because you could probably do a 2-day seminar on just the topic, what's your why? But what is one or two key points on helping someone understand how to discover what their why is?
So the biggest thing is, you want to know where you're going before you make that first step. So you really want to, and that's kind of where we're going to tiptoe into principle number 2 a little bit, which is vision. But you got to kind of see where you want to be at the end of the road. And you got to envision that. You got to picture that. You got to feel that. And then you got to ask yourself, why do I want that? And that will eventually create your why. But if you don't see the end in sight, then you don't know what your purpose is. You don't know what your why is. So my light at the end of the tunnel was, I want to help other people do whatever it is that they want to achieve in life. And why do I want to do that? Is because I feel like I'm here on borrowed time. And I want to make the best out of every minute that I get to breathe. And that's why I do the things that I do. And so that's really
it's like how Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. So you have to have some navigational point, but then the next question would be, why do I want this end result? What is the point of this end result? If it's just to get more stuff, then what's the point? So once you kind of have that compass pointed in the right direction, now that starts to help you create your story. Now, how can you comment on kind of like how the why pulls you toward it rather than feeling pushed to do something that you might not be passionate about?
So it's a great question, and it's a great point. I feel like if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And again, time is our most valuable asset. And if we're not doing the things that we truly want to do, we're wasting our time. And we're not only wasting our time, we're probably wasting the other people's times as well that are associated with us at that moment. So the energy that's pulling you towards your vision, towards your end in mind, quote unquote, should always be a pull. I feel like when you're feeling pushed, it feels, what's the word?
Like labored.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel genuine. Mm-hmm. It feels rushed. It feels, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's just not genuine. And it's things will happen when they're supposed to happen, right? And when you're pushed, you feel like that. You feel obligated, or these are the words that are coming to mind right now, and that's not real to me. Real is getting up out of your seat and knowing that I am setting course on this goal because this is why I want to do this. I'm passionate about it. And that's
well, have you ever heard the examples and even research from people that say, go on, just get away, go when you're on vacation, or you take a half a day off from your work and you're driving down the road, sitting in the mountains or going to your favorite spot. That's when your mind relaxes, and sometimes, many times, that's when these flashes of brilliance happen. Well, if that is the case, or since that is the case, then if you are pulled, if you have set your navigational compass on the right why and end goal, you feel pulled towards something, which gives you then that passion and that enthusiasm, and then that sets the stage for those great things and ideas. But on the other hand, if you feel pushed, then you're just trying to get it done to check the box off, and you're not going to have those flashes of brilliance and passion.
Exactly. The effort and the commitment doesn't come naturally. Mm-hmm. And that's the key. That's the key. You want that passion to flow freely.
So why does it seem like success comes easy for some people that don't even do some of the things that they could be doing that other people have to do in personal development or things? But you just look at someone and go, man, that just looks so easy. Is it literally easy, or do they just make it look easy, but yet they're doing the work behind the scenes?
Well, here's what I think what brings success more what makes success easier for some versus others. And it's this: focusing on your strengths and delegating out your weaknesses. I think we get in our way day in and day out when we focus on things that we are not good at. So it all comes down to self-awareness. If you're aware that you suck at XYZ, then you are 10 steps ahead of the next person who will spend countless hours trying to run through the muck to achieve that task, when the more successful person, or the one who finds success easier, says, you know what, I'm really good at this. I'm going to stay in my lane, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get somebody to help me do that, because I know I'm not good at it. And it's such a fundamental concept, but why do so many of us get in our own way? So that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, that right there is a 3-day seminar in and of itself to go deeper on. And I know that there's some wonderful books like Built to Sell, and The One Thing, that talks about focus and talks about don't have 50 items on the menu, have 20 that you do flawlessly. And I think that's a huge, huge point. So that makes me think of another aspect or another question, which is, why do people live most of their lives wanting and wishing, as opposed to making progress toward that end goal?
Fear, Mike. We're so afraid of failing that we paralyze ourselves. And it's a shame to see this take place, because it's amazing how fast time flies. And one of my mentors, Gary Vaynerchuk, told a story one day about when he was in his early 20s, he spent a lot of time with older folks, in their 80s and 90s. And he asked them, what would you have wanted to do in the past that you didn't do? And they came up with, I wanted to do this. I wish I did this. I wanted to do this. And he said it was saddening that they had so much regret built up. And I think that's one thing that drives me the hardest, is that fear of regret. Not because right now we have all the time in the world. I'm at an age where, it's like you could do anything you want if you put your mind to it, right? But when you're 80 and 90, that slowly starts to go away. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you won't be able to do. It's physically impossible to do things that you wanted to do, that you should have done, could have done, would have done. And that's tough. And when people let fear control that, they're really doing themselves a disservice.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to realize that fear is normal, fear is natural, but you just made a big distinction, which is when we let fear control us. So you can recognize a bit of fear, and of course we know that fear, an acronym, stands for false expectation appearing real. Many times we fear something that never comes to be, but don't let it control you. Recognize it and deal with it and move ahead, but don't let it control you.
That's it. Yep, you have to push through it.
So let's talk about the principle of having a vision. We touched on the concept of begin with the end in mind, how Stephen Covey teaches just to have that focus, forward-facing focus. But what is a vision, and how does that play into building off of having the why?
Yeah, so I think the more creative and more crystal clear your vision is in life, what you want to get out of it, what you want what you're living for. They say live life on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
The quicker you will be able to achieve what it is you want to achieve along the way. So when I first started my business, my vision really, I had one. I'm not going to lie. I had a vision, and it was grandiose. I pictured myself on one of the top floors in a New York City skyscraper. It was floor to ceiling full of windows. There was about 20 designers all lined up in their stations, and I pictured myself walking down the aisle, looking at everybody's projects that was going on, and being the commander-in-chief of my brand and of my business. And I had this vision, right? But it didn't really turn out exactly like that. And it's funny, but a lot of the core concepts, the core achievements that I wanted to have did come to fruition. For example, I always wanted to build a team. Now, I may not have a team of 15 that is housed in the 60th floor on Fifth Avenue in New York City, but I have now a team of designers who I oversee that all work remotely,
mm-hmm.
that are all in the States, some local, some on the West Coast, but I've created this team over the course of the years, and now get that same fulfillment. It's just not on the 50th floor in New York City.
and that may come, but also we have to remember that there could be in our goal setting and life journey slight pivots. So you didn't go from one vision to something completely different. It just was a small change.
Exactly. But the end goal, the end reward was being able to build a team so that I could help my clients on a higher level, because you can't do everything yourself. And I finally realized that after you hit a certain point in your business, you realize that, if I'm going to go to the next level, I need to build a team. And so when I saw that come about, it was very rewarding, and I treat my team as if they were my family, and it's very rewarding.
So what's the difference between a why and a vision and a purpose?
So your why is what you're doing the things for. The vision and the purpose is being able to see where you're going. So it's what versus why. It's what versus why, really. So it's your vision is okay. If we get there, this is what we'll be able to do, and this is what will come as a reward or a challenge, even. But now, what are we going to do to get there? And so that's where your why comes in. It's the choices that you make along the journey to your vision. There's the difference.
And it almost seems like the vision, if you can formulate that correctly, just brings your why to life to help you kind of have that pull power even more effectively.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So is there any specific tips you can give on formulating a vision? Because a vision could be like we've heard of a vision board, or it could be, like you mentioned, you envisioned floor-to-ceiling glass and 20 designers lined up. How can you give some advice on formulating that visual representation of your why, and why is that important to do?
Because it gives you a clear focus. It gives you a clear path. Now, that path isn't going to be straight by any means, but it will give you a laser-focused guide on where it is you want to be. And it was funny. I was talking to one of my buddies the other day, and we were playing this backyard game, cornhole, where you set up these boxes with holes in them, with one hole in them, and you throw these sandbags across. It's almost like horseshoe, right? You're trying to get the beanbag into the hole, and then there's points that are involved in that, and so on. And so my partner was struggling tremendously, my buddy, trying to get this thing in the hole, these bags in the hole. And I said, envision the bag just going into the hole and let everything else go. And sure enough, before he threw that bag, he would close his eyes for a split second, picture that thing going in the hole, and then he would throw. And he started getting them in the hole. And I was like, do you see how powerful your mind is? Your mind saw you making the basket, saw you making the bag go in the hole, and then when you tried to do it, it just felt easier for you because your brain said, "Oh, you already did this already." And when I shared him that little, he had like the biggest epiphany in his life, I think. So envisioning the thing happening before it happens, is a huge tip that I use for myself and that I share with my clients to help them get to where they want to be.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're setting your GPS up, and it's going to get you there because you put the end address in, and then depending on what kind of phone or GPS you have, it's going to show you the little map and the little arrows and the right turns and the left turns, and so you can visualize that to go, okay, coming up I have a left turn, so I'm going to get in the left-hand lane here, and so you're visualizing your business success or personal success before it even happens in kind of a motivating way.
Exactly. And it's funny, I had a conversation with my wife recently about, the things that we're celebrating our 5-year anniversary in 2 days. And we put together a little mini vacation, and we're going away, just her and I, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. But when we were planning that, we were talking about what we've accomplished as a team over the past 5 years. And the things that we did not have a clear vision on did not come to fruition. But the things that we were crystal clear on, and we actually saw them happening, every single one of those things came true. And I said, that's the power of vision and purpose.
That's a really relevant principle, proof of that principle. And so now, doesn't that motivate you to say, hey, if these things that we really were clear on came close or full on to fruition, what else can we enhance And maybe these ones we're a little fuzzy on that we really want. Why don't we do a little work on, really getting these a little bit more in focus?
Yep. And that's where the game changes. The game changes is when you take the time and you put in the effort and you make the commitment into what it is you want to do, and you clearly see what that is, and then you just go. And my wife and I are both doers, and that's why things happen.
But once you have that end goal in mind and you get that clear vision, it's kind of like, now I've got the starting point, the end point, but that's when the plan and the strategy and the tactics have to start being formulated. And I think that there's most definitely a system and a way to do that, but I think there is some element of don't worry about the how, just get the why down and the vision, and then some of those things will come about because you start noticing things in your connections and in life that, this could help me with my vision. Do you find that's the case as well?
Exactly. And sometimes you trip over things that you weren't expecting to trip over, and you're like, holy smokes, like, that's what I've been looking for the whole time, and I just tripped over it. And that turns into something. So it's the journey is always going to be fascinating.
And if you did not have that vision in place, you might have just walked right over that thing, not tripped over it. But the fact that you had that vision and that clear destination in mind, you started noticing things, and maybe those things are all around us anyway. We just aren't picking up on them because we aren't fine-tuned.
That's it. It's a great point.
Hey, so now let's talk about the principle of things aren't always what they seem. How can we now move from developing our why to pull us and then developing our vision to help clarify and focus to realizing that things aren't always what they seem?
Well, and this is why it's so important to understand your why. Like, why do you do the certain things that you do day in and day out? Because I'll be very transparent and vulnerable with you. When I first started my business, it was all about the money. It was all about the money. I have a uncle who's an extremely successful businessman. Grew a business from nothing to $200 million in 40 years, 45 years of being in business, and that to me was a great motivator for me. And I saw a lot of the material things that came with that success. And so in my life, I said, I want that, I want that car, I want that house, I want those things. But what I realized was, as I was accumulating those things, I was never satisfied. And I always wanted more. And at one day, it just hit me. Because I realized that, nobody really gives a darn about what you have. They're more concerned with your why. Like how much you care. They don't care what watch you're wearing or the car you drive. They really don't. But if you tell them, this is why I do what I do, which allows me to have these things, that's a whole different story. And so that's part A of the things aren't always what they seem, because I thought money made you happy. Money got you all the beautiful things and all the expensive things in life. And when you get those things, you're happy. But as I was accumulating those things, I wasn't getting any happier. I was actually getting more miserable because people started to see me with these things, and they would have their comments and judgments, and it really wasn't. And why was I buying those things, right? At the time, I wanted to impress people.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to show people that, hey, I did this on my own. I did this and I did that, and this is what happens when. And nobody cared. Like, nobody cared. And now that I look back, I look foolish, and I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wised me up to today where I'm to the point now where, like I said before, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. I'm at the point now where I can actually pick and choose who I want to work with and do the things that I want to do, because I realize that it's not about the material, it's not about the money. It's about how much you care. And that's the shift. That's the shift. And so money, it was all a lot of smoke and mirrors. I saw a lot of successful folks. I met a lot of successful people over the years that had tons of money. But when you get them behind closed doors and you're just chatting with them and you're getting to know them for them, and the cameras aren't on them and they're not on social media, they were miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart went out to them, because I got to a point where what you see on social media is what you see on my living room couch when there's nobody else around.
Mm-hmm.
And people started to see that, because I started to come out more on social media and do video on a daily basis, and people start to see the real, the realness and the genuity. And I started to share my vulnerabilities with people, and they were like, that's motivating in itself. So that was the big takeaway in life, where, at the point where I thought that I was like showing everybody that I was this guy who did it all by himself, and now look at me, look at what I have, and nobody gave a shit. So, excuse my language. Nobody cared about it. They actually resented me for it, because I wasn't showing them why. I was just kind of being that flashy guy. And then it all caught up to me. It all caught up to me when things started to go down in business. When things go up, they must come down. And when those things started to become, things started to get stripped from me, I realized that, like, wow, that stuff really doesn't matter. And it was that point that I said, I got to focus on my why. Why am I doing these things? What's really important to my life and to the success of this business? And it's funny. I read something recently, and it was one liner that really hit me, and I understood it because I saw it in my own business. It said, if you're not in business to help others, you will never be a profitable business. And I was just like floored, because what was happening was I was not in business to help others. I was in business to only make money for myself.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That's all I cared about. And with that mindset, I slowly watched my business disintegrate, almost to nothing, until I smartened up and got the help and, got my mind in the right place to turn it all around and take it to where it is today.
Would you say that pivot was more an internal versus an external, and I would say that you would agree with that, but at what point does your internal decision change become noticeable to the external people and clients and prospects around you?
Okay. So to answer your question, it started externally because what was happening was these external voices, the things that mattered, the people that mattered to me the most, started vocalizing basically this, Mike. If you continue on the road that you're going down right now, you will lose us. We will go away. And internally, that was something that I didn't want to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to myself, wow, I really need to make a change here, because if I don't, the things that mean the most to me, that I've taken advantage of for all these years, eventually will be lost. And that's when my internal said, we need to make a change. And I didn't really know how to go about that change until I actually got, professional help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where everything started to shift and pivot, and mindset completely got rewired into a more selflessness
Mm-hmm.
versus the selfishness. And
I would think that an element of that shift, you had to have pure 100% genuineness in that shift, because otherwise people around you would think you're just doing it because you think that's what they want to see. So can you speak to when you finally realized this needs to happen, these certain steps, and then buying in internally so genuinely that it becomes very, very believable?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you a very specific, laser-focused response to that. So when I was in the selfish stage of my life, I spent 14 hours a day working. And my wife only saw me when I went to bed at 1, 2 in the morning, and by then she was sleeping. And I did that for 3 years, okay, until it finally caught up with me. And then when everything hit the fan, I said, that's the biggest thing that I need to focus on right now, is being more family focused and being more present.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, I'm not present at all. And so what happened was I shifted, and I realized that, okay, I need to call a day at 5, 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I need to focus on my family. And it was so hard, Mike, to actually shut down and unplug and be present for a couple of months. And then I realized that I saw the happiness and the joy that was coming from my wife's energy. And that's what kind of pulled me to buying into that. Because I was so afraid of losing her, based on my actions prior. I knew this was it. And I actually began to slowly but surely unplug easier and easier and easier. And now it's common practice. 5:30, everything gets shut down, and it's my wife and my dog and
yep.
and my family, my extended family, and those are the times that I cherish the most. And so it all comes back to the why is I want to spend more time with them. So here's what I need to do between the hours of X and X to make sure that can happen. And so you're right. People will call your bluff in 2 seconds if it's not genuine, and they'll feel it from a mile away.
Mm-hmm. But when you make that shift and then it continues on consistently, then even the people that were a little skeptical start going, okay, I guess that's the new Henry, or that's the new, person. And so then that starts to convince them because you prove it with your consistent actions. So you mentioned about some role models. Sometimes people might look to a role model that might appear all at an upper level. What happens when that role model isn't who the person thought they were in many ways, financially, spiritually, physically, emotionally? They just start seeing the cracks in the armor. How do you, as a person, deal with that disappointment? Because now there's that difference in that role model's role in their life. And how do you deal with that? And then how do you bounce back from that disappointment?
Right. So when something like that presents itself to you, what I've done to get past that is to pull the positive and pull the benefit out of that experience. So instead of resenting that person or putting that person down, talking badly, all of those negative things, I look at the positive and I say, well, wow, now that I know that, I know exactly what I don't want to do in life. Or that's exactly what I don't want to happen to me. And so I constantly pull the benefit out of that. And it makes me realize that, listen, whatever happened to that person happened to them because of them, not because of anything else. It was their decision. It was their actions. It was their chess moves that got them to where they are in that specific time. And there's nothing to do with me. And that's okay. That separation is okay. And so that's the biggest thing. The biggest takeaway is focus on the positive, not the negative, and move forward and build from that, learn from that, and make yourself stronger.
And it all even plays into that is the awareness. You need to be aware of that contrast and then be willing to see where you need to move forward and build. I think that's a really big piece. And that leads right into the next principle, which is building relationships, because many times those relationships are built on that false impression. So can you speak to now how to start moving toward the principle of building relationships?
Right. When you're building relationships, one kind of, I guess, theme or meme that I saw years ago was serve first, ask later. And when you come from that mentality, if you think with that mindset, Gary Vaynerchuk always talks about in partnerships, always give 51%. Always give 51%. That's how you build strong relationships. Mm-hmm. And people will see how much you're committed, how much you care. And that's the foundation of building a great relationship, is showing how much you care. And everything else builds on top of that.
Yeah, and that really ties then into the concept of creating long-lasting relationships because people will see the genuineness or the disingenuousness, and that would lay the foundation for a long relationship, which is what then ties into a why. You want a long relationship personally and professionally with people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So what does a solid, healthy relationship look like on a business level? I think you've talked quite a bit about on the personal level, but what about from a business level? What does a solid and healthy business relationship look like?
So first and foremost, you want your values to align with your partner. You want to make sure you guys are on the quote-unquote same page. The other thing you want to make sure is that it's a win-win situation for both. Expectations and deliverables and roles of each partner are agreed upon, and like I said, makes sense to both parties. Because the minute one feels like they're doing more than the other, that's where the disconnect or the unbalance begins. It's the old saying, pulling your own weight. You got to pull your own weight to make sure that the relationship works for both sides. So value alignment, making sure that it's a win-win for both parties, having clear and defined roles for each partner makes so much sense to building a strong and long-lasting relationship.
Yeah, and actually, literally defining some of those things, even if it's not together as both parties, but even yourself defining, I would like to see this relationship move here, achieve this, how can I give, how can I serve, some of the things you've mentioned there. Are there any specific tactics that you would recommend in building and deepening a healthy relationship like that?
Yeah, so, it comes down to integrity, right? Like what you say you're going to do, make sure that you do it. And again, pull that weight, or go the extra mile for that person, because it's the law of reciprocity, right? When you give first, it will come back around. It may not be tomorrow, the next day, the next month, the next year, but it will come back around, and you'll benefit from it. The key there is to not expect it. Don't do it to expect something in return. Just do it. Just do it. And that's where your genuineness will shine.
It's kind of like if you want to have a friend, you need to be a friend. What energy you're putting out in the world tends to come back. And if you wake up thinking today's going to be such a bad day, well, maybe it will. But if you wake up thinking what great things are going to happen today, you'll be watching out for them. So I think that goes also into strongly how a relationship develops personally and professionally.
That's right. You do the right thing. Just do the right thing, and good things will happen, and the right things will happen. And if it doesn't feel right to you in your gut, it's not. It's not. Just know that. Yep. And we all know when we do something that is half, just is not 100%, mm-hmm. and you're really doing yourself a disservice by even stepping one foot forward on that, whatever it is, versus knowing.
We know when we're doing mm-hmm. something selfishly for our own benefit in a transaction or a relationship, and you're trying to put it under the guise of helping someone else out, but in reality, you're not.
Exactly, and it's BS, and people will see right through it.
Yeah. Hey, so can you speak to the concept or thought that to break through to the next level, you need solid relationships, whether it's personal, business, strategic, but you need to develop them for the right reason. In other words, like what we're saying, people can tell if you're just trying to do something to get something back. Like the bellhop, carrying your bags and then holding their hand out. That's not the vibe that we want to foster in a strategic relationship.
Nope, exactly. And you have to understand this. You cannot get to where you need to be or where you want to be on your own. You just can't. And your business will plateau, and it will hit a certain point where you say to yourself, this isn't serving me anymore. I want to do this. You're going to need a friend. You're going to need a relationship. You're going to need help to get there. And in order to do that, you need to form these solid relationships. The stronger the relationship, the quicker it will be to get to where you want to go.
So can you speak to your 4 principles? What's your why? Having a vision. Things aren't always what they seem. Building relationships. We've gone very deep in these. So I want to ask, by successfully addressing these, what outcome would someone hope to achieve?
Well, you'll have a clear vision on where you want to go. You'll understand why you're doing what you're doing. You'll know that everything isn't always what it seems, and to kind of look in between, in between the borders, and to see things for what they truly are, right? And to know that when you do this, you not only become more mature, but your mindset starts to shift, and you really start to feel fulfilled. I did that without stuttering. So, like, when you start to feel that fulfillment, that reward, that achievement, following these principles will help you get there, because you want to feel important, right? You want to feel like you're doing something for a reason, for a purpose. You want to be recognized. You want to feel all of that. And these were some of the principles that I went through in my life that allowed me to feel what I'm feeling today. And
it's kind of like in business school, you learn about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which some of which are achievement and recognition, and people want those. These are basic psychological needs that we have, and like a job done well. You work all day digging a ditch, and you end the day just exhausted, but you feel like you accomplished a lot. And in some of these principles we've talked about, when they are done right for the right reason, that fulfillment is just spectacular.
That's right. And that's where you find true happiness.
So what do you find is a common obstacle preventing people from achieving that desired outcome?
Letting fear get in the way. We're so afraid of failing, and that fear of embarrassment, the fear of not being worthy, the fear of not being able to bounce back and be resilient, but it's all on how you look at it. You can look at at something tragic and say, I'm never going to get out of that. Or you can look at it and say, because this happened, it has motivated me to now take things to a whole nother level. It's your mindset. It's how you look at things. Half empty, half full. It sounds so cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah. So what do you think is a misconception that someone might have, like, oh, it sounds so easy, or I'll address those fears. But what's a misconception that people may have in working through these principles?
The misconception, in my opinion, is that things are, it is what it is, right? You hear people say that a lot. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. Like, I'm dealing with the cards that I've been dealt, and that's it. That's the end-all, be-all. And I call BS to that. I think if you truly want something and you're that passionate about getting it, there's nothing that can stop you. It's you yourself that are putting the walls up, and it's you yourself that is getting in your own way from stopping you to getting what you truly want. And so the misconception is, oh, I just have to, those are the cards that I've been dealt, like, oh, well, like the Eeyore, people have Eeyore syndrome from, Winnie the Pooh. And I laugh because it's so false. It's those limiting beliefs that these folks put in their heads. And I raise my hand. I've had those same limiting beliefs in my head for years until somebody finally helped me squash them. And then I realized that anything is doable. You just have to believe it. You have to dream it, envision it, and then you just have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So here's a thought now that we've really, really highlighted the principles and some of the obstacles, the fears. What's the solution?
To just go out there and do it. Just take your time. Like, that's what's so funny. And I think if people just took 5 minutes out of their day before they start their day and before they end their day. And when you end your day, you ask yourself, what are 3 things? What are 3 awesome things that happened today? Right? And then what could have been better? Right? You ask yourself those questions before you go to bed. And when you wake up, you ask yourself, what can make this day awesome? And it's just that pre-planning. I don't think people give themselves enough time to pre-plan and to kind of dial in and focus on what they truly want to get out of the day. I think when people just take a second and do that, it allows them to be a lot more efficient, and they'll be able to accomplish a lot more.
So what if someone recognizes this, kind of these principles, and thinks, yeah, that'd be nice, but then they ignore addressing it? What are some consequences if they ignored focusing on some of these items?
When you ignore these items, who are you fooling? You're not fooling anybody but yourself. And that's the biggest thing. You have to be true to yourself. Because if you're not, you're the one that you're hurting. You are the one that you're hurting yourself. You're not hurting anybody else. So if you kind of want to bypass any of these principles and say, oh, that doesn't pertain to me, I can bet your butt some way, somehow, and sometime you will be affected by one of these 4 principles. And it's going to show up, and you have to handle them. You have to look it in the face and say, how can I take the good out of this? And focus on that.
So I agree with you, and that makes just total sense. And it kind of brings full circle some of the teachings and readings that we hear so much about, the positive thinking. But you broke it down to some very simple things, which are, just focus on 3 things that are good. What is something you can do today, right now, that you can move toward? Is there another piece of advice you could give for people that are considering really moving forward on these principles?
Yeah, you have to listen to your gut, and you have to truly believe inside that this is something of supreme value to you that makes sense for you to actually take action on it. Because you have to weigh that value. Don't weigh the value based on fear or how hard that achievement may be to get. Focus on, is it really going to serve me once I achieve this? And make that your decision whether to move forward or not.
And really, really bring to light that vision of the why, and maybe contrast that with what happens if I don't take action. And if you can kind of make a vision of that, kind of like the unwhy, what would it look like if I don't? And many times you hear people that are having weight issues where the doctor says, if you don't lose this much weight, you will whatever, have a stroke or whatnot. And I think that when people can see that contrast, that can really clarify that why to take those next steps.
That's it.
So what's the next step? What could people do to learn more about how you could help them with these principles, with anything, with some coaching and some direction?
Okay, awesome. Well, you can definitely check me out on my website, which is uniquedesigns.net. And I also post tremendous amounts of value on my Instagram account, which is unique_designs with a Z. And on top of that, I produce daily content at this point, on my YouTube channel, which is Unique Designs by the HMK Group. And that's where I really dive in deep, and I post tons of video, not only behind the scenes action of the projects and the creative stuff that we're working on here at Unique Designs, but I share with you guys a lot of personal stuff, mindset stuff, business, entrepreneurial tips, tricks, advice, and I slowly am sharing my journey with you through storytelling over the past 10 years of growing my business to what it is today. So, I think you'll find tremendous value out of the accomplishments and the mistakes that I've made in my entrepreneurial journey that can help you with yours.
Excellent. Well, Henry, thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful learning more about your journey and your passion for helping others to succeed.
I appreciate the opportunity, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.